welcome back. It's Christine again with the Artist Pod, and today we'll be talking about how to draw a cardinal. As always, I'm using a Wacom Intuos Pro tablet, and I'm drawing straight into Photoshop. So, let's get arting. Alright, so here's the cardinal. They're cardinals, if you don't know, are red. They have some black on their face, brown legs, brown eyes. So I'm going to get started by filling in the whole thing first with shadow. So when I'm talking about shadow, right, it's just very, very light pen pressure. See, it's not very extensive there. And for reference, right, this is full pen pressure. You can see how different that looks. So this is how I fill in the shadows. And so when I'm adding in highlights, all I have to do is add both more lines and more pen pressure. And that'll fill it in nicely. But by getting the shadows completely done first, it makes it a little easier to kind of control that process. And so I just kind of draw in the direction I think the hair, or in this case the feathers, is already going, or the direction it should be going, right? So up the crown of the cardinal's head, you have this sort of nice little, I don't know what you call it, section of feathers that goes up. All of that would be going out towards the end. And then, as you come over this way, you sort of change that direction. You need to be careful by the eye. Oh, there's some black up by the eye too. I think I was a little overzealous with that. Right, eyes, first thing we look at as humans is eyes, so being careful by the eye. And then being mindful, right, typically on birds, the fur over the eye loops down, and under the eye it loops up, and it kind of meets in the middle. Right. And so it's just kind of this light, light pen pressure, filling it all the way in, so that when I take off the drawing layer, just a second, that's what it looks like so far. And then for the black, I'm going to be using a gray. If you followed my videos, you know that I tend to use gray for black because I draw in black, so I can't use black for black. So I'm going to get the whole thing done in shadow, so this light pen pressure. You can kind of see I've kind of already sketched out the direction that the feathers should be going. I've also sketched out the shadows. So I'm going to get all of this done with this light pen pressure, and I will be right back. Alright, so now that it's all sketched in, I am going to add highlights. I'm going to start with the red. Like I said, I've already sketched in where the shadows would be. So looking at the shadows, I've selected the highlight to be above and to the right, and you kind of see that, right? Backside is in shadow, under the beak is in shadow. And yeah, as I said, it's pretty straightforward. You just kind of add more lines, more pen pressure, and you just kind of fill it in to create the highlights. Alright, so if I take that off. Now I am intentionally adding a few more clumps. I do this sometimes when I'm sort of testing out different ways of adding in highlights and shadow. I don't know that I like it yet on this though, so I'm probably just gonna scrap it and fill the whole thing in. So I'm gonna do that with the red. Gonna get the highlight all in place, right? Because you have, with that light source above and to the right, the whole backside here, you have a little bit where I have it coming in by the eye, And then kind of under where the head is, I have a dip coming in. You wouldn't necessarily always see that, but you also wouldn't necessarily not either, so I felt like that's a good shadow to add. And then some sporadic shadows kind of around, dipping around different feathers and stuff. So I'm going to get this red all done, and I will be right back. Alright, so I'm just going to kind of blend it in better. I know I said that I wasn't going to keep doing what I had been doing as far as, maintaining that kind of sparse look, and then I changed my mind, and I obviously just kept doing it. Right, so then I'm just blending this in, I'm basically just drawing into the areas that are in shadow, where I think the shadow's a little bit too extreme, and just very lightly, again that light pen pressure, filling in spots where I think it needs to blend better. I can just push, it's not necessarily unfeasible that the light's uneven. And it's only in areas I think the transition is too harsh for what is happening. So it's not everywhere. So it adds, by shadowing it the way I did it, it adds a little bit more depth to it. I don't always do this, and whenever I start doing it this way, I never like it. And then partway through, I do. And so that's actually why I decided to just keep going to see how it turned out. So if I don't like it, I can just add more highlight, and then all of this detail can kind of go away. Okay, so now we're going to get the beak. I did say all of the orange, and then I didn't get all of the orange. So let's finish out the orange. The beak, and then I'll get the black, and then the legs, and then we'll move on to the eyes. I think that's everything. Beak is pretty straightforward. Right, there's none of this extra detailing that I did. You were just, and I do need to make sure that I am blended nicely here, so it helps to blend by putting in full pin pressure, and then as I get close to an area where there's going to be shadow, backing off the pin pressure and just using the extra lines to brighten it up. And then underneath here, right, there's going to be a little spot where the beak goes into shadow, right where the bottom of the beak meets the top, but otherwise there'll be a little bit of a highlight there. See, that's how you get the look of the beak, is you allow that to go down into shadow. There'll be a little bit of a shadow where it connects, and then just making sure it's blended. And the beak is going to be nice and shiny, so you can brighten that up a bit. Right. Okay, so now for the black. Yeah, okay. So same thing I did with the red, except it's black, so sometimes that means you need to be a little bit more careful. Not black, it's gray, because I don't want it to look gray. But the red might be poppy enough that it's not. I am doing exactly what I did with the red, though, in that I am creating the texture of feathers, or I'm not fully filling in everything. I'm kind of picking and choosing. Right, I'm doing like strips. Right, so a strip, a little strip, and then a little strip, and then depending on where I am, so in the body I have these nice long strips going, in the face probably a bit shorter as I bring that down. Looking for areas I can kind of create almost like triangles with the feathers. Right, so a sort of contained section there, contained section there. Here we have a little bit of a spot we can do it in. And if I take that off, you know, that's kind of where we're at. Now the other thing to realize too, though, on the face here is that the feathers on birds right through here typically tend to be a little like shorter and more chaotic and not quite so long and connected as all of that. So I could fill in and still would be okay. Wouldn't necessarily look like I've made a mistake because the feathers here aren't meant to kind of be this way. Now under eyes, I usually give a little bit of a burst. Well, I always do, even if it shouldn't be there, because it just kind of looks better to us. It draws attention to the eye, which is the first thing we're going to notice anyway. You know, just kind of all around. I also might be putting a smidge too much pin pressure here. Really brightening up this this gray. And just making sure it fully connects in with the red. And then as we come underneath, right, it would go into shadow. So you start losing some of that, backing that off where it would no longer be in highlight. And then once again, doing what I did with the red, now I can do longer strips. We have these longer sections. I still have, you know, shadow sort of mixed in here. Yeah, because you don't want that too bright. Okay, so for the feet, kind of tucked under him, right? So I really only have the feet, the actual like feet out of shadow. But I didn't include this. As you're shadowing something like this though, right, the bottom or the left is going to go into shadow. And by shadowing, I mean highlighting. Right, so weighting this off to the right. And then going into shadow as we come across. And making sure that all runs together. I'm just giving a little bit of a run up the leg just to give some depth. Really light pin pressure though. And over here. Just to give it some depth. Maybe blended better than that. Okay, now. Gonna draw in the eye. Sometimes I do this, you know, on birds. Birds are basically the only animal I fully fill in the eye. I guess I do it sometimes. If their eyes are big enough, right? I'll do a full circle. I don't always do it though, because having the shadow of the eyelid is kind of nice. I feel like I'm going to go a bit higher than what I just did though. Because it can look, you know, if you do it all the way around, sometimes you accidentally make it look shocked. And I don't want to do that, although I don't think that's how this is coming off, so that's good. Just looks like a bird. Right, and then make sure, right, this is a solid circle, so any errant mark like this out. Sometimes I'll take the elliptical marquee tool to do that, but not always. So just make sure it's nice and clean by the eye. Now when you're drawing an eye and I'm doing something like this, I'm doing it on kind of a semicircle, right? I'm not going straight across the eye, and I'm not going up. I'm going following the eyelid to create the shadow not doing the opposite, right? So, okay. Light source coming from above and to the right, and that means that there's going to be a burst of light against the pupil. So nice solid pin pressure. This is a different layer, yeah. And then on the side of the light source, I'm going to fill this in all the way underneath the eye. And then go into shadow at the edge. Right over here as well. Go into shadow at the edge on the right side where the light source is. So back off that pin pressure. Back it off as we get up towards that top, because this is going into shadow. That's what that dark black is. And then it's going into shadow on the back side, but not as much as, like, it's okay to sort of fill this in a little bit. Not as much as above, obviously. And you want this pop against the pupil to fill. And then you can brighten up as needed in the areas that need to be really bright. Now the other thing I do sometimes, I'm just debating on if I should do that here. I could, if I had like a burst of like orange maybe. It's got to be brighter. But not overwhelming. Maybe there. We'll see if this works. So what I do sometimes when I'm doing something like this is I'll add in these squiggles of a brighter color, and I keep them within the iris. I aim these squiggles towards the pupil, and it's just kind of a quick up, down, up, down. It helps mimic the muscles in our eyes, and add just sort of a little bit extra energy to it. Nothing big. I can fill it in as much as I want or as little as I want. And then sometimes I'll also put in another burst against the pupil in this new color to really hammer home that it's that light hitting in the eye that's doing it. Can add a lot of interest for sure. Okay, so then we're going to add a light flare against the eye. So the light flare, I tend to try and draw in and mimic. So I'm going to draw it within the highlight of the eye, not where it's tipped into shadow. And I sort of mimic the idea that there's trees, right? Especially with a cardinal where there would be. So up and down and up and down. I actually don't think that looks bad. I can erase out as needed, but sometimes one go will do it. Sometimes I'll do like a little, I'll erase out or do an extra little spot just beyond. I don't know that it's needed really with the cardinal. I think it looked just fine without it. Yeah, and so you get that nice burst against the eye there. Now, what I am going to do as well is come in here, choose an orange, nice bright orange, and I am going to, in the areas of highlight where the light would be the most extreme, I'm basically going to be filling it in with this kind of burst, right? It's not going into the shadows. It's not everywhere where the highlight is. It's only where I think the highlight would be strongest and really catching, pushing into the black as well, because this isn't color dependent. It's basically just adding a burst of highlight. I usually do it over the eye as well, no matter the animal. And then under, for the same reason I put a bright light under, catches the eye, adds interest. Again, eyes, we look at eyes. But picking and choosing where this is going would be on the beak as well. A little bit more uniform on the beak. Maybe a little bit underneath. Okay, so we're not done yet. We're going to add a burst of blue. I'm going to take a nice bright blue. This will really look good, especially on the cardinal. And I'm basically going to put blue using very light pen pressure in the shadows. This is utilizing color theory. Right, blues recede, or I should say cool colors recede, and warm colors push forward. So I tend to use, and this is a pretty bright blue, but I tend to use this very bright blue for shadows frequently. And it can look really nice, but it is also very easy to overdo it. So being very mindful of what I am doing. Only goes in the shadows. And really, sometimes I'll brighten up little sections of the blue. I don't think it needs it. So then the last thing to do is to sign it. And then rethink where you've put the signature, as one does. There we go. There is our cardinal. Alright, so that's how you draw a cardinal. I hope that was helpful. In the floating nether next to me I have other videos of art tutorials I have done, and I will see you all soon. Thank you so much. Take care.